message was absolute fire, and she talked a lot about community, and I'm so excited to be hosting this community panel today. I am Anna. I am the head of community here at Rev Genius, and so I'm going to have our panelists introduce themselves. So Katie, why don't you take it away?
Absolutely. Thank you all for having us. My name is Katie Wright. I know many of you here. I'm so excited to be a part of this. I'm the head of community over at Metadata, and we just are actually about to officially launch the demand community, which is the only community for demand gen marketers. So keep an eye out on my profile come Thursdays. We've got some very exciting stuff.
Hi, everyone. I'm Shernaman. I'm new here. I'm the Community Platform Operations Manager at Cisco Meraki. But I've been in the industry for about 5 years and have experience working with well-established communities as well as helping to launch brand new ones. But I'm super passionate about community customer success, and I truly believe that building meaningful connections with your customers will transform really the way you do business. So I'm super excited to be here talking with Katie and Anna about all the great stuff that that community can bring to organizations.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think community is really interesting because when I first got into this industry, my sister was already, who, by the way, my sister is Katie, super established in the industry. And she just really described it to me as community is the wild, wild west of tech. And so I think that community is something that's like always growing and ever changing. And if you're on LinkedIn, you'll see like job descriptions of community are all so different. Sometimes it's like a real community job, and then sometimes it's like social media management, and people use the word community like to cover such a large space. And so I'm really excited to dig in with the two of you today to look at what community looks like for each of us, because I know it looks a little different, but also what the similarities are in that. So I kind of think the first place for us to start would probably be talking about like general community programming. Like, how do you two utilize community programming in your day-to-day life and in your long-term tracks for your communities?
Yeah, absolutely. Chris, you want to start off with this?
Either you can start off or I can start off. Doesn't matter. I guess. Okay. all right. I'll go first. Okay. I mean, full transparency. You're totally right. First off, Anna, that community is definitely the wild, wild west for sure. I can't tell you how many of those like positions that are out there. They have like all these different roles, and they're so like vast. Like it's like you're going to be taking on the whole community stack, but we're only gonna like there's just this one role, or like you have very specific things you're gonna be working on. It's totally crazy. There's so much stuff out there, and but I mean, full transparency for me, kind of jumping into the community industry, I really didn't have much experience with programs or project management, and I think that for a lot of communities, it's they're working on grassroots initiatives. Really just kind of going with the flow and just kind of seeing what sticks. And that was really a lot of the team styles that I've worked on was just very reactive when it came to building programs, or focus areas and how we measured success. But I will say with some blood, sweat, and tears, just kidding. Over the years, I've learned really like some of the best practices that have helped me the most be very successful in my role and how to actually make the biggest impact for our customers and businesses. And I have like a few things that really, for me, has helped. Really, it's always having like a clear program charter or overview. Communicate. That's like literally the thing, like between you and your members, but also internal stakeholders. And then really documentation is king or queen, whichever one, but literally documenting everything that you're doing really is going to help in the long run. But those three have been personally some things that's helped me. I don't know. What about you, Katie?
Yeah, absolutely. So first off, you're totally on point with those three like kind of overarching statements. I think whenever it comes to community programming, at least for the demand community right now, we are really, really, really working hard on making it be truly member first. And so a lot of our programming that we're actually focused on is based off of what our members have been asking. So whenever you talk about like overly communicative with your members and the potential members that you may have in your community, what we've really been seeing is by asking for that feedback, it gives our members a sense of ownership of the community, and therefore they want it to be more successful because they're tied to it. I think that this is something that we actually can see so frequently with the Rev Genius community as well. You know, it's on people's LinkedIn's and they're sharing about it because they feel a sense of ownership. And so when they have that, they want to see the community programming be successful. And that's why they usually have some pretty good turnouts. But yeah, for us, it really is polling our members, asking them what's most important. As we've been building the demand community in our beta launches, I mean, I can even pull up my Slack and show y'all. I have so many messages and polls in there of like, hey, do these topics resonate with you? What are you most curious about? Do you want to do this event? And I had this idea a couple months ago, and I thought it was a cool idea, and it was called Remote Work Together, where people could sign up for sessions. We would have like maybe 1 or 2 1-hour blocks a week where people who are working remotely could hop on a call, be on mute if they wanted to, or even brainstorm. You know, we're kind of missing some of that in-person aspect of being able to go to someone's cubicle and say, hey, can you look at this? And while I love working from home, I don't want to change that. It's kind of nice to have those opportunities. And so I thought it was just the best idea. And while I had a bunch of people be like, oh, this is really great, and they voted on it, once it like came to practice, they're like, I don't know if I can fit this into my schedule right now. And of course, like poor planning on my part, I tossed this in at like the end of the month and the end of the quarter. So of course no one has time for that, which was very stupid on my end. But anyway, so when it comes to programming, like we pull our members, and we also do like a lot of social listening to help create the programs that we run as well. So not just within the community. I'm using a really great tool right now called Common Room. And so it's actually tracking what my members are saying on different social media platforms that we're engaged with. And so from there, like I can actually see like what are some of the key topics that people are most interested in, and like what are things that are happening not inside of our community that I could replicate or even do better inside the community right now. Those are all the things.
I love that, though.
Go ahead, Chris.
I don't know. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think that's interesting. And I feel like as someone I'm newer to this space, like learning how to listen to your community and see what they actually want. Because I've had ideas, I'm like, this sounds awesome, I would want to do this. But then they totally don't pan out. Mm-hmm. And there's ideas that people say they're on board for, and then it comes time like for them to actually show up, and then they don't. So I think it really is this thing of like trial and error, and then really getting to what the pulse of your community truly is, which I think is really interesting. I have a hard time with, I think now there's a hunger for people to do in-person events and to meet in person. Because I know for myself, like when I'm done working, I just don't even want to look at a screen. It's exhausting. Mm-hmm. So the idea of some sort of like online networking event sounds tiring. So how do we create events that are engaging, create spaces that make people spend more time on screen, you know, and engage with you, your company, your product?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's interesting you bring that up too, because I think that like in the height of the pandemic, a lot of folks that were doing like in-person events were just like, oh shoot, what do we do? Like, how do we bring people that love to like, you know, meet in person to some of these virtual events? And then like after it, like kind of like started, like everything's kind of starting to simmer down. We're starting to like, you know, meet back in person. There's been I've seen a lot of talk of kind of like hybrid type meetings where like, you know, you can meet in person, but also like for the folks that, you know, aren't able to, you know, maybe meet or, you know, don't feel comfortable going out to meet in bigger spaces, are able to kind of, you know, jump online too. I think that, I think it's definitely an interesting kind of time right now too for this, like, where you have those two different types of personas. But I think that, you know, that's what a community is though. I mean, either offline or online, like we're all human, like, we're creating a space for everyone to really connect, share, and collaborate. And Katie, if you would have invited me to that, I totally would have been down to like just put some time on for just, I would have been on mute, but I would have been just working and just like, hey guys, like quick question, like would have loved that.
Hey, done. I'll just start a new one for community managers. So if you guys are interested, slide on into my LinkedIn messages. But yeah, I think I think where it gets really tough though, whenever, like, especially if we're talking about like community programming related to specific events and like trying to make that hybrid work, is like really setting expectations for what that is. Like, so I was just at the CMX Summit for community managers, and it was cool because it was a hybrid event where things started to feel like you were missing out. Was if you were in person, there wasn't a place to watch the completely remote track. So I have to go and rewatch watch the recordings that we had. And so like that was something where it's like, if it was really hybrid, I should be able to watch the remote ones, and then people at home should be able to watch all of the sessions that are in person. And then like the chats that were there, I wish there was a functionality on the app or in Slack or something where people could be engaging in the chat. Because I had no idea what was being said in the chat, especially even on my own session I had no clue what people had to say. And in the recordings, I can't see what the messages were. So I feel like there's some missed opportunities. So I think expectation setting, even just in general community programming, is so imperative. You know, we want to make sure that our members are really happy with what they're getting and that they feel like there's value for them. And I think if we kind of set that expectation from the beginning, then they won't feel like they've been hoodwinked or like they're missing out on something, you know. And I think that's really important, especially as we test.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that kind of goes, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just saying, yeah, absolutely. That was all I had to say. Sentence finished.
Well, no, I mean, again, that's kind of like where that programming comes in, like, you know, being able to even like kind of work internally, like before you even, you know, put together, you know, an event or, you know, a huge project, like really like, for me, I mean, I used to like, you know, just like, hey, we're going to go off the flow. We're going to like, you know, create this, do this. And then like, you kind of miss out on some of those opportunities, like Katie, like what you were talking about. But for me, like really setting that program charter or program overview, whatever you want to call it, really helps to bring that like idea or strategy that you want to bring to life. And I feel like, you know, in the community space, like you should definitely be looking at like what that includes, like from start to finish. Like, you know, what's the objective of this event, or what's the objective of this project? You know, who are we going to be working with, all the way down to the requirements and scope. And then, you know, even like kind of the follow through. I think that's kind of like a lot of programs that I will admit at the beginning, like there was a little bit of follow through and not a lot. And I think that when you think about like these hybrid events and you want to, you know, have these types of, you know, conversations or record these sessions that people are at home and they can't jump into. I mean, to be honest, I wasn't at CMX, but I would have loved to be, and I was virtual. I definitely had the, you know, FOMO going because everyone was doing all the great stuff after the sessions. Like, hey, can someone just take a camera and just like, you know, walk me around? That would be amazing.
Done. Next time you'll just see me and I'll just be FaceTime like, hey everyone. We got a really interesting question in the chat from Candace asking about benchmarks. Candace, you're totally going to hate my answer on this. I'm so sorry. But this is actually something I struggle with all the time. And I bet Chris can probably agree, because it's hard to find benchmarks because everybody's community is so different. And like I said, that's the shittiest answer. Because I know what you're wanting, because it's what I ask other people for. And I was just talking with some folks yesterday about community stuff and trying to like get an idea on their benchmarks. But what I've seen is there's really no like industry standard quite yet. And I think a lot of it is because community is still so new and community programming is so new. My recommendation is ask for time. I know so frequently that's not something we get a lot of when it comes to testing and programs. But what I like to do is I try and get like 3 months, get 1 quarter for baselines, and then from there, look at all that data and start building from there. And so you can do this with like testing content. So if I post in the announcements channel on Monday versus Thursday, and do that for a month and a half and just kind of look at that data and see what gets the best responses, what doesn't, what type of questions. People do this with newsletters frequently, with subject titles, do the same thing with community programs, but try and get a good amount of time, 2-3 months, and start looking, because that's, while obviously we'd want to do like a year long, it's, you know, it's still important to kind of figure out what you can with that. I know Chris probably has some.
I 100% agree with that. And exactly kind of like what Kalina said in the last session too, is like, it all depends on, your organization's, strategy, what the goals are, the objectives. You really got to take it from that top approach and then figure out and kind of funnel that down to kind of like, okay, this program, this specific thing that we're working on. But again, that's why we're talking about programming, because again, you should definitely, before you jump into anything, figure out what are the KPIs or how are we going to be measuring this specific program. I think to be able to understand how you're going to figure out what the success looks like for this, that's where you're going to help out, or you're going to find things that you're looking for. But I would definitely suggest, again, connecting with other community managers in the industry, talking to them about what they've worked on, what they've, have used as benchmarks, and then just really take that and just kind of like, let that soak and then figure out what works best for you. Because again, not every community is the same.
Candace, I just dropped a link in the chat from Higher Logic. Chris probably knows this pretty well. It's about the 99-1 rule. So 90% of members are lurkers, 9% respond in some faction, and only 1% of the members actually create new content. This is actually, interestingly enough, a fairly controversial discussion right now in community, because this is something that's been around for so long. And what we're seeing is exactly what we're talking about. Everything's going to be really different. And so it's hard to say like this one rule is going to apply like a blanket application, but something to consider. I see in your comment about 5 to 10% of the membership consistently engages, something that I'm trying to figure out how to track. So if anyone has tips, let me know. So I have a 31.5% engagement rate right now. I just pulled it up from Common Room. To me, I'm very happy with that. But what I want to see is it the same 31.5% of my members, or is it shifting? And then if I can figure out like by titles or by seasonality, like, is it changing because of life, flows of sales, whatever it is. So I think that's something to consider as well. Maybe a small amount of people constantly engaging, that number could, what's comprising that number could change often. So that's just something to think about.
Yeah, it can be really hard to track engagement. Like, what does engagement look like? We at RevGenius have like a hard time with that as well, especially, our company is our community. Like, we're not selling any other product. Like, RevGenius is a community. Like, that is like the basis. Without community, we literally have nothing. Like, that is what RevGenius is. It's all based around community, but our community is on our Slack channels, and also our communities in RevLeague or on LinkedIn. And it can be difficult to track all of that. And I'm very this is not sponsored by Common Room, but like, I'm excited. I actually want to like learn about that, because that's interesting. Like, that as the head of community over here makes me interested in knowing, okay, what is my community talking about off of the Slack? Because maybe they're not super engaged on Slack, but I can promise you that they're engaged on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, right? So that excites me, is like being able to grab that data, because that data can be hard to get. Like, you can use on Slack uses the tool Dots, but like Dots can only speak to so much. Ahoy can only speak to so much. So it's interesting to be able to learn about what your members are doing outside of just your community, so you can learn how to reach them more. And that 99-1 rule, I think, is really interesting and something I've looked at with our community as well. And also, I think for people out there who are growing communities, just take a step back and think about your involvement in communities outside of your job, right? Like, I'm sure that a lot of you on your Slack are a part of a multitude of communities, but how many of those communities are you actually active in? Or how many things have you signed up for and you put your email somewhere and then you didn't even know you were subscribed? Every time I open up my email, I'm surprised by how many spam emails I get from companies that one day I thought, oh, this is worth me putting my email in because I might be interested. So think about how many of your members have done that same thing as well. So I don't know. Community is wild. We have another question. I just wanted to touch on. This is from here. I'm going to put it on the stage. Would you approach community leveraging differently if it was an internal knowledge sharing community in the organization you work in? Anything different from what you do now? I don't know if either of you can speak to that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you've got so many different, I mean, two different types of personas. You're focused on like the external, customers, partners, even prospects or leads looking at your community that if it's open, and then like your internal knowledge sharing community for the organization, it's going to be completely different. I've worked with both of them at previous communities. And I think with the internal facing communities, it's a lot more of like knowledge sharing, a lot more of, getting a lot of your like DE&I, communities into that area, but being able to provide like one space. But like, I think that within like the internal organization type of community, it's more focusing on like what's available for, employees. What do we want to get employees involved with, and what type of information can we share? And some of the things I've worked on that has been super helpful is, adding in, some best practices or even like programs that sales or marketing is working on, and, having that live there. I've definitely seen other companies use like, Google Suite or something like that to kind of like have all of the information there, but having it in the community is I feel like a lot better, because then also you're driving a lot more of internal associates to the community and getting a feel for how to use the community when they want to go and venture into like the open community areas.
Yeah, I think you're totally spot on. At Clary, it was a customer-facing community. At Sales Hacker, it was obviously very non-customer-facing. It wasn't about our product. It was about, creating a different generation of sellers and changing the way how sales has notoriously done things. And so when it comes to internal knowledge sharing, what I saw to be more interesting was the levels of support I could get internally when it was a customer community versus like an industry community. So I thought that was kind of unique. But yeah, I think Chris, you totally hit it on the nose with your responses. So
awesome. We have another question. I think this question I think is fabulous. It's from Bren, and it says, in many cases, the community is really customers, and sales often thinks they own the customer relationship. How do you balance the dynamic of various orgs who would love to engage with or learn something from the community while maintaining the integrity of the customer first spirit?
Can I kick? Okay.
You kick it off.
Okay.
I'm
so excited about this question because I have so many examples. And Brent, if you want to chat offline, add me on LinkedIn and I can, show you stuff. But I love this question. So as someone who used to be in sales, I understand like the protectiveness. I hated when marketing was like, oh, let me ask them. And I'm like, stop talking to my customers. Stop talking to my prospect. You're going to screw it up. I'm going to lose the deal. And it's all going to be because of you. Now, on the other side of things, it's been amazing. At Metadata, it's been such a unique experience because our, like I said earlier, the demand community is for all demand gen marketers. We have a private channel for customers, and that's where we really encourage our customers to put questions about metadata because we don't want it to be a spammy environment. However, it has been absolutely amazing because some of our customers are asking questions in the general channels just about like LinkedIn ad best practices, and other customers are going in there saying, oh, we use metadata and this has helped us with blah, 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 blah. And that's been so cool. I'm then taking the screenshots and putting them in my internal Slack saying, hey, shout out to these amazing customers. If they're yours, please send them a thank you gift from us because I want sales to use their budget. But then it's been cool because then there's prospects that are engaging in those conversations. And today we had a situation, someone posted about Reactful, which is a company we just acquired, and its other competitors. And I was like, oh my gosh, I looked on Salesforce. We've got a bunch of open deals with them. And I post it internally and I say, hey, sales, you probably want to send a message with these resources because this is what this person's asking for. So it's really been customer and prospect first, which is amazing. And with marketing attribution is a huge thing we talk about all the time. I know 100% that if it wasn't for the community, my sales guy would have no clue about this need because he's not, where this person is. So it's been really cool. But another thing that's been really helpful, Chris and Anna, we were just chatting about this before we went live, was we just launched a community newsletter. And in our first one, we did a regular one for the community, but then I'm doing an internal newsletter for our sales, our revenue and enablement teams, and our customer success team, showing like who are the most active accounts, who are the most active members, what are people talking about that we should probably know about so that we can better position ourselves. And the responses I got were amazing because people are like, holy shit, this is amazing. I had no idea these conversations were happening. And I'm like, just do some that's basic social listening, go to any community and you can see these conversations happening, regardless of our own. Even on LinkedIn, you can see it. So I'm very excited about this. I do think in order to really hone in an experience like that, you have to have executive support. You have to have executive sponsors that are going to really cut through some of the noise of ownership levels. I'm very, very lucky that our entire company is like, we share everything. We're very open with each other. And it's been a very unique experience. Chris knows that is not always the case. And I'm kind of at an anomaly. So it's almost a culture change in order to have that shift happen inside your organization.
Yeah, I love this too, because it's like, okay, I think this is kind of like where you and I, when we first started talking and kind of connecting on community, we both had the same background being from sales. And this is funny enough, my introduction to community was as a seller, and really what has ignited my passion for this industry. But I was literally an SDR looking for a way to land or even expand the accounts that I was working on, especially for the reps that I was working with. And I found that not only directing prospects and leads to the communities helped me in that role, but I went as far as even connecting with the community to understand how they're putting together such events of having customers talk about their use cases and share those with just openly. And for me, utilizing that program that they were working on and kind of taking that more of an internal user group or an account specific type group, and working with the selling team and our sales engineers, hey, we're going to go ahead and do this, and you guys aren't going to do a demo, you guys aren't going to talk. And at first they were all like, wait a minute, what? This doesn't make any sense. But once they saw the value of actually bringing in licensed users of the product to share their use case with the rest of the organization, with our very first meeting like this, we actually ended up getting an enterprise deal because of this. We had over 80 people in this one meeting, which normally we'd only get 4 or 5 people in this initial meeting, and it just blew up. But using even use cases like this, with other sales folks that have done something like this, and sharing that within the internal organization, that's something that's even huge too, because then they kind of see the value that community brings and how it can help them, in their goals for the year too.
It's job security for us. So it's
Definitely
really important to actually be able to demonstrate. And where it's tough, I think, is catching those conversations, because so often even if they're in our communities, they're, and through direct messages and stuff where it can be a little challenging to actually find it yourself. So it's really cool when you can see that, and then you can, I sent an email to my CEO or to my boss, who forwarded it to my CEO. And I was like, look at how, this is community-led growth right here. This justifies my existence at this company. So that's always a good feeling.
No, I think that's really interesting. Candace has another question for us. She said, what should be pinning? Did it pin? Where'd it go? Okay, here, I'm going to share it to the screen. What are your thoughts about the potential for communities to get too saturated where people simply don't have time to join communities?
I think this is kind of two questions. I think it sounds like the main question is, there's so many communities out there. So like, how do you keep people maybe coming back and engaging? Or there's so many communities. So how are you, making sure that your members are like actually active? I think it's like, put your sales hat on. It's all about value. I think if it's important to them, they'll be a part of it. And if it's not, it's not. I also think communities, and we talked a lot about this at Sales Hacker, engagement and membership engagement is like very much a tidal wave, and it ebbs and flows. And so and think about it too, like the people in your community are not a tool, they're people. And life happens and things happen when their work is so busy and they're not able to engage as much. And then they come right back around. And what we saw at Sales Hacker was we would have members that would come around because they were brand new SDRs, and then they would kind of fade off a little bit. And then they'd come back and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm an AE because of the stuff I learned here. And then they'd kind of fade off a little bit, and then they'd come back and be a manager. And so with those ebbs and flows, really what you should be focusing on is, how do I minimize the time between the two and make it more valuable, so that like during each of those stages of life for our members, there's something for them. So I think that's something that's like super important.
Yeah, I think it's like a lot around gamification too. Like really being able to build up the gamification in your community. You also have to kind of understand like what motivates your members. Usually like when you're looking at members that are joining a community, and exactly like Katie said, we're all human, we've all got stuff going on. But when you look at folks that are jumping into these communities, they're usually coming in for education, exposure, or connectedness. It's really gonna be around one of those three things. So if you're building more gamification around those three things, it's really gonna help people to keep coming back in. I know for myself, Anna, when you said earlier, when you like join all these different types of communities, like really how many of them are you like really focused on? I am, I do that, and I probably am a part of like 20, 30 different communities, and I probably only really join or like am active in like maybe 2 or maybe 3 of them. Definitely need to do better, but I think that's, I go back because like I want to, I have questions, or I have want to connect with others to like understand what other people have done. And I think again, just understanding what motivates your members is what's going to help kind of break that up. And then also like, figuring out a solid gamification plan for your community, it's gonna help to bring more people back in.
Yeah, and I see in the chat, Bren and Candace, y'all are talking about how, you're in a Slack community and you can barely keep up with all the different rooms and channels. That sounds like a management concern. I know for us in our Slack community right now, we wanted to start off with very limited channels. And if I start, like, I just deleted the job board because we have a different opportunity for that now. And so I'm always looking at ways to condense, but also create like clear messaging so people understand like what discussions belong in that channel. This is also something as community leaders we talk about all the time is, do we want to stay on Slack? Do we want to go into Insided or like an actual or Khoros or a different actual platform where people can come in and search things a lot easier? And so it's tough because, and I'm sure Chris sees this all the time and Anna probably sees it as well, is with this discussion, it's, do we move to a platform that is a pattern disruptor? So people have to constantly think about if they're going to go to that community or not, or do we stay on Slack and have a handful of people be upset because, their messages are gone because we're not going to pay for the paid version at $8 a user, which is insane. That's insane. And so it's like, there's pros and cons of both, but you have to think, and whenever we think of like member journeys, we have to put our customer success hat on, think about our user journeys. Is it easier for them to go into our Slack community more, would they be more frequent in there versus an actual website, or if it's an app? And so, those are kind of things that we have to think about, because we get messages like this all the time. And so, hopefully this is a little insight into the things that we're considering when it comes to this.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, just like Rev Genius, I mean, everyone here is a member of Rev Genius, and the amount of channels that Rev Genius has, right? And we actually just went through a complete restructuring of all of her channels because we had so many. And to be honest, it's because when Rev Genius started, like Rev Genius wasn't a company when it started. It started with Jared doing like some version of Whiskey Wednesdays on Zoom, and he dropping like a link on LinkedIn, right? Like that's how this whole thing started. And so it just grew and grew and grew and grew and moved to Slack. And then there's all these channels. And so what we did actually was we put like 3 different categories at the top of each channel. So you have chat, you have events, and you have place. Mm-hmm. So like when you type in the word chat, then like you can see all the different chats that you can join. And then I've actually institute a thing. I have people coming to me on a daily basis wanting to open up a channel at Rev Genius or wanting to open up a channel for or do like in-person events or whatever support they need, right? Like we as community managers know that every day we're being hit up for people that want to like grow, right? So like, what are the requirements for that? And what's the requirement to like have a channel keep going? And for our unique channels, I have like a 60-day rule. And at 30 days, like if the channel has over 20 members in it and that's active members, then the channel can keep going. And then at 60 days, if there's not still that like 20 active members, the channel gets shut down because there's no point, right? Like, why are we like keeping a channel running that only has 2 people talking about a podcast whenever they feel like maybe dropping something, and in all reality, probably just doing self-promotion, right? That's like an issue you get into too with these massive communities, is they just become a spam dumping ground of like people being like, look at my LinkedIn post, look at my promo, which is just annoying. Like, who wants to read that? So I agree with you too, Chris, is like gamification. Like, what can we do that like rewards the user, rewards the person? And that's something that right now at Rev Genius, like we are really trying to build and trying to create that space for people. And we also like did a really big thing, and we moved all of our events to LinkedIn, which was like big and a scary move because we aren't just doing all our events in-house now. But to be honest, we have seen benefits from doing that because now we're reaching to an audience outside of our Slack, and we're able to go beyond that, bring those people in from LinkedIn, and then bring them back for more intimate programming that is happening on our Slack channel. But the most important thing is not just like bringing them back for bullshit programming, truly. Like, oh, wow, another person about like how to get into SaaS. Nobody cares. Like, you can get that anywhere. Like, what's something unique? How about meeting with like David Weiss and having our sponsors like do an entire lunch where everyone gets a $25 like Grubhub certificate for an hour of Ask Me Anything with David Weiss? Like, why don't we bring in like thought leaders and like, have those people talk about it? Candace, you asked, can you talk about your experiencing running them on LinkedIn, the events? So it's been a journey. We are like in a testing phase with that. So we have put like a ton of events out there. And so we're seeing the ones that are like hitting. There's some that are going huge, like cold calling, outbound 2.0. We have leaderboards. So those are very exciting. We launched our Marketing Mondays, which actually Katie's speaking out on Monday with Christina from HubSpot. So that's going to be really, really awesome. So we have all those events that are going live, and then we take those events and we do more intimate learning. So that's, I think, the most important part is like, if you're going to reach outside of your community to bring people in to like have something worthwhile. So it's a great strategy. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. Get the ball running. It is like, it's insane the amount of work, because now not only are you managing your platform, now you're managing a platform that like you don't technically have all the admin access to, right? Like I don't run LinkedIn. So it's exhausting, but it's kind of worth, if you love what you're doing, then it's worth it. So
yeah. I couldn't agree more. Just mic drop right there. I could not agree more. Yeah, that's great. And I'm a little quiet on this because like for the most part, I've worked on communities where like everything is like under kind of one roof. And I've worked, on migrating a community from like a couple different areas into that one roof. And I think that it definitely makes those events and this programming a lot easier when it's under one roof. But like when you get to a point where even like your members are like off doing their own thing and then, creating their own types of communities within LinkedIn or other different types of social media, I think that's a great problem to have. But I couldn't agree with you more, Hannah. Like literally, like when you want to bring them back into like the actual programming under, your community, like having some really good shit in there to like, help them, become more involved and more engaged in the community space too.
And some advice that Katie actually gave me when I got started in this was I was having people kind of bombard me. People were bombarding me with like ideas for community. They're like, oh, I want to start this channel. Oh, I want to run this webinar or whatever. And I was like, I don't know, like how to filter all of this. Mm-hmm. And Katie said like that she gave me this advice, like have them go into the community and like look and see what the community actually needs. Like if someone's just coming to you with their product and they're not even a member of your community or they're not even active in the community, then they really have no business speaking to the community, right? So it's really important that the people who are doing those intimate relationships, pieces of events, that they are actually in the community and active in it, because then they can actually speak to what the community wants, what they think the community wants.
Yeah, that was one of my biggest learnings from Sales Hacker, because we had a lot of consultants and sales trainers that they would reach out and say, I've got a great idea for this, blah, blah, blah. And they weren't even members of our community. They just wanted to leverage us as a platform to help build their brand. And while I appreciate that and I respect that and I understand it, that was my number one thing was, hey, I love this idea. In preparation, and while we're kind of fleshing this idea out a little bit more, I'd love to see you get involved with the community and start building that relationship so people are more likely to come to that because they already know who you are. And so, honestly, I would say like 7 out of 10 people did not do that because there was work involved with that. And so it made my job a lot easier. And I think it's totally fair. I wanted to protect my community members and the relationship I had with them from folks who just wanted to get an easy lift of their brand. And that was, and that's something we struggle with is, I want to provide value and give them resources. I'm also very happy when people say, hey, I'd love to help and do this, because then it's less work on my side of coming up with the topics and finding speakers and sourcing and planning and all of that. So I always like that, but you have to be like very cautious and also hold that same standard to every single person. Because we would have folks, Tito Bort's a great example. I adore him. Whenever I was in sales, like he was the only person I listened to. I did the same thing to him. And he would go into the community and ask questions and be involved. And I said, by God, Tito, I'll put you on anything that you want, because you're the only one that, you have so much experience and a wealth of knowledge, but he could actually participate and wanted to do that. He saw the value on both sides.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think that's like actually like kind of, this is the perfect subject to end our call today, because we're almost out of time. But yeah, it's like if people want to pour into the community, make sure that they bring value to the community and that they're willing to do the work. That's how you're going to differentiate the people who are there to spam your community from the people who are there to like actually bring true value. Both of you, thank you so much. This was so valuable. And if I am honest, I think it's the best panel of all of RevCon, to be real. real. So thank you all so much. Everyone who's watching, please make sure that you follow both Chris and Katie on LinkedIn.
I'm dropping our LinkedIn's on here. If you've got questions, let us know. We're here for y'all. And tag us on LinkedIn with what your favorite takeaways are. We want to know. So
definitely.
We love that. All righty, everyone. Have a great day.
Bye, y'all.